everyone. Welcome to Cultivating Conversations, where we celebrate the women fueling mortgage transformation. Our session today is presented by Mortgage Innovators and Indecomm, and I'm your host, Joy Gilpin. I'm the Vice President of Automation and Client Success here at Indecomm. And really, I wanted to just share that our goal for our time together is to start to explore the inspiring journeys of female trailblazers who are shaping not only the present landscape of the mortgage industry, but the future as well. So we're going to go about that a couple of ways. First of all, we're going to really talk about the professional impact and experience that some of our panelists have had, their practical innovations, and really our constant pursuit of improvement. You know, each of our guests is here sharing their stories and insights along with their inspiration and motivation so that we can, as we cultivate these conversations, tend to the needs of the industry and ultimately the borrowers that we serve. So if you're here for some inspiration, maybe a side of actionable strategies and lessons learned, or maybe you're curious about the evolving mortgage banking landscape, we are here to celebrate the journeys and achievements of the women in the mortgage industry by cultivating these conversations together. So with that goal in mind, I'd love to introduce our guest today. It is Karen Whitcomb, who's our Director of Services with ICE Mortgage Technology. Karen is a 40-plus year mortgage industry veteran. She supports verticals like sales, operations, the secondary market, and post-closing. Karen's a training resource. Karen's responsible for driving customer success management, implementation, workflow efficiencies. To say that Karen is an Encompass SME is probably a gross understatement. She's a certified Encompass admin. She's an HDI certified support center director. She's a certified Scrum product owner. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, because everybody's welcome here, she is a badass. And I have had the good fortune to work with Karen. I can tell you she is not only a powerhouse professionally, but individually and personally, she's just such a kind and empathetic person. She's so generous with her time and her knowledge, up to and including her time today. So welcome, Karen. It's so good to be here together with you.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here and talk about my two passions, mortgages and technology. So it's great.
So I'm guessing you're having a great day. Today, one of our Karen catch-ups is stationary. Typically, Karen and I like to do some walking meetings because we think that when we get our hearts pumping, our ideas get moving a little more. So, you know, Karen, thinking about our purpose here today, I'm wondering, you know, I think about how I perceived or pictured my career and my life when I was just a really young person. And I did not envision that I would be the vice president of automation and client success. I had some ideas, but I suspect that you too, as a younger person, did not have this necessarily as your path in mind. So what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I started even as a young child, a kindergartner, wanting to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor, and I thought that was my path in life. And I even started UC Riverside in their biomed program, which is a 7-year program to become a physician. And so I started there, and through that time, I realized I needed to take a break. I was looking at missionary work, and then started as a typist. This is back in the early 80s.
There was a thing called
an actual typewriter for a company called Guild Mortgage. And as I started there, I learned more and more about this thing called a mortgage. As a 18-year-old, 20-year-old, I'm like, what's that?
Your mortgage knowledge is that my parents have one.
Exactly.
That was my mortgage experience for my first mortgage job. What do you know about mortgages? My parents have one.
Exactly. But it was so exciting to understand that this whole work that I was doing, which was typing assignments to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, was actually a part of a whole dream come true for somebody getting into a home. And so that was pretty exciting for me, and what I had learned from that.
So Karen, how then did you leverage that early experience with Guild as a typist for assignments into the next gig?
Well, you know what it is? It's and at Guild, I worked in different positions. I'm not somebody who sits still. I always want to know why we're doing things. Why are we doing it? How does it get done? What does it do for somebody else? And understanding,
I'd like to pause for a minute there because I feel like that right there's a little jewel that just fell from our guest Karen's idea, which is be curious, pursue new information, kind of dig in a little bit deeper. So what you're saying is you were just interested. It didn't really matter if it was, you didn't have necessarily a path carved out. You were
correct.
just trying to acquire skills and knowledge.
That is correct. I was a typist. They asked me to help with their QA audits. So I kind of started at the back end of mortgage
Which is
banking
a
with
real fascinating
shipping
way to
and
start.
typing and QA. And doing that, moved to a place called UHM, which ended up being Merrill Lynch Mortgage. Merrill Lynch bought that
Yes, the
entity,
game of
and
acquisition.
so it's the acquiring game that we see often.
Yes.
And so I worked there in shipping and actually became an AVP of post closing at Merrill Lynch, and moved on from there and worked in. I kind of moved forward because then I went to the Bettis company and worked in different places in the Bettis company as far as shipping and secondary marketing, helping with. This was back in the day. I don't know if people remember this, but this is when you did a trade, when you picked up the phone and you actually called and did a trade. It was
Get the ticket.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it was pretty exciting. So it was always learning more though. It helps all of us as we learn more because it allows us to do more and to think of things in different ways because now we understand why things are done the way they are, and do they have to be? And
You
that's
know,
where our technology comes in.
it raises a really interesting point, Karen, because I thought about that in preparation for our conversation. One of the things we're trying to do is sort of sprinkle some information and knowledge and some practical tools for people that are growing into their careers now. And I thought about what it would feel like early in my career to have been dropped into a role like this. Because once I'd sort of settled into the mortgage vertical, right, then these types of roles started to be like, okay, well, that seems like something I could be interested in. But there is no shortcut for the path, right? I mean, there's no other way to get ready to sit in the seat other than to do all the other smaller things that lead to that opportunity. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. The knowledge is critical to being able to present to customers, to borrowers, to your teammates, to the people who report to you, and have that ability to answer those questions that they're looking to have answered and grow them in their roles. Because again, you're right. If I didn't have the knowledge I have, I wouldn't be able to sit down with a customer and say, hey, you know what? Help me understand what you're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Because when I look at what you've asked, because oftentimes customers ask a thing, but if they don't tell me why, I'm going to give them something that's not going to get them where they want to go. So I
So
need to understand where
innovation
they want to go.
can be built on fundamentals, must be built on fundamentals,
It has to
right?
be. Absolutely. So,
So when you're working with clients, right, this is a challenge I think we all face, right? Because there's the business objectives that we're all trying to support, right?
right,
You're protecting ICE's interests and you're trying to create as many meaningful enhancements and features and usability elements for the system as you can. But then we also are trying to serve the borrowers, right? So we serve all of these different folks with different interests in mind. And I think one of the things that comes out of that fundamental experience of just getting your reps in, right? Sitting in the seat, processing a file, typing assignments, auditing, doing QC, figuring out
right,
rebuttals, all of that comes down to then when your client is challenged by X, you have some tools in your toolbox. to ask meaningful questions, right? Because I suspect that rarely does the ask actually represent what the result ends up being. I have attended a number of experiences over the years. And when I was an Encompass team member, one of the things that we heard over and over and over again is, wouldn't it be great if Encompass could tie my shoes? Wouldn't it be great if Encompass could? I mean, like, but there's always something that it would be great if it could do. So how do you take that wouldn't it be great and build it? Because that actually, you guys, is what Karen's team often does. They help drive meaningful enhancements and changes to the system.
Well, you know what it is? It's really about understanding the end goal, right? So understanding where they're trying to get to. And let's face it, we talk about mortgages, and mortgages really are about assessing risk. When we're doing that mortgage, we're assessing the risk, right? And there's science to that. And that, the science piece, where it's the data, and that's where you can automate. That's where you can innovate. The art piece is where you want to free up your team members to be able to have those meaningful conversations with borrowers. And that's why it's important for us as product owners or professional services or training or even technical support to have those meaningful conversations with our clients so that we understand where they're going, where they're trying to get, how they're trying to serve their borrowers, so that we can help them innovate the automatable things and innovate in that space so they're freed up to do the other conversations. Because at the end of the day, there's a life at the end of that loan.
There's
right?
a family. There's people that are living. It's my favorite thing about the mortgage industry. Every industry has a commodity of sorts, but ours are homes. And I love that so much. And I think one of the sort of there's always that breaking edge for folks. And I think one of the things that kind of keeps people in the mortgage industry, people say that, have said it for the entirety of my career, which I don't mean to brag. I've been in this business since I was like 5. So, I mean, my 25 years started, it seems like just yesterday.
Yeah.
But is the connection to the borrower. It's that it's homes and lives and, that the sort of economic generational impact that having home ownership as a part of your story really resonates with the people that are in this space. So Karen, I'd like to talk a little bit about your work at ICE. I think I mentioned, but I'd like to say it again because Karen is the Director of Services with ICE, which means she spends a lot of time listening to client challenges, right? Lenders, brokers, originators, loan officers, processors, anyone that's going to touch a file throughout Encompass and, solving challenges. So my question is, I know for a fact, Karen's not one to get out the brag sign very often. So I know she's going to tell me that all these things that she's going to talk about are things that her team has done. Well, let's just say for the sake of argument that her team plus some help of Karen sprinkled in. I'd like to know a little bit about some of your early professional experience that you perhaps drew from to drive some of that innovation. I think about things like product enhancements, forms, workflow, right? You have a great history of reverse engineering process. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it all goes back to how do we help our customers, our clients, and do the work they need to do in ways that allow them to be freed up. Again, I think about that often. How do we free them up to have those relationships with those borrowers, right? So how do we make sure that data is flowing, documents are flowing between the client and title companies, between the
client
vendors
UI and the
exactly. So how do we get the data into the system in ways that allow them not to have to re-enter data over and over again? How do we create processes or functionality that lets that happen on an ongoing basis. And the product team works diligently to take information we bring to them from both support and services as to this is what customers are looking to drive that efficiency, to drive
So here's
those
the requirements, but
automations.
here's also the user experience.
Correct.
And marrying those two things together. So kind of
Correct.
like all of your experiences have sort of led and stacked up to leverage and draw from what, what you've done over the course of your career. You're still pulling from those experiences when you're solving situations today.
Well, and it's funny because as I started in, I didn't even think about mortgage software. I loved mortgages. I loved doing that. And when I was young, junior high, I was president of the computer club where we were programming with punch cards. So I'm truly a geek by nature. It's who I am. And then I get to combine my love of mortgage banking. And as I joined ICE, Ellie Mae at the time, but ICE Mortgage Technology, I was able to take all of the knowledge I had from programming, because I had programming classes in my history, and talk about, okay, so how does that look, and understand what's possible. And as languages mature and as you have more innovation within the programming language,
the program itself,
you can start to do some of these things. You think about Star Trek. I'm a geek. So you think about Star Trek and you think about the flip phone from the communicator in Star Trek. And when you start to think about mortgages and what needs to happen, using the experience and the what if of a processor or a closer or a secondary marketing manager allows you to start to do those things in a way that is going to drive those innovations. And that to me is truly exciting. And that's where we sit in this whole technology world in mortgage banking.
So you have kind of catbird seat, right? Because you're literally where the rubber meets the road. Right. And I have to say, in my kind of innovation conversations, it's the same for me. I get giddy when it's time to actually move from testing into limited production, supervised production, where we're starting to watch robotic process automation take place and change the requirements and the calls to action that processors have, that pre-funders have, that underwriters have. The palpable enthusiasm that happens when you get to see something that you took from concept, you go, what if, to when it is actually happening is endlessly satisfying and also a little bit addicting, right? Because we're constantly then looking for, like, what can I do next? What's the next thing?
Right.
So Karen, when you think about Encompass, because this is a massive system, I think for me, the thing I find most compelling about the customer base is the endless appetite for growth, right? That same thing of what else can it do? So let's talk a little bit about kind of where you see things coming soon. What are the things you're trying to solve for today? And then we'll kind of shift gears towards our best ideas and lessons learned. But I'm interested in kind of what's coming. Any sneak peeks?
Well, again, it goes back to that data and understanding the data and how to use the data. I think we've got two different paths that we're looking at. We're looking at how do we take the data and automate that data to populate into from the document, from forms and documents
we can use it once, or
we can
grab it once, use it lots of times.
Correct. And then the other area is really around this, the e-close. We're looking at how the e-note works and really getting with the different, and we've got Rebecca Frisbee and Nancy Allen working diligently on getting those items really buttoned down for our customers so that these electronic mortgages can really take place in the real world. And we've got some of that going now, but there's still areas to grow across the board for all of us. I have to tell you, we've been talking about e-close since the mid 80s.
Yes.
No lie. So to see it really come around is really big. But I think the most important thing in today's market is understanding what is it going to take to be able to use the data we have to help our borrowers who are looking for affordable housing.
That's right.
I think affordable housing and what we do as an industry in affordable housing is going to be critical. And how do we innovate there? And we really need to come together as an industry and look at that, because we really do, that generational wealth that you talked about, those are the things that we really want to drive for those borrowers who currently have some issues in trying to get into homes.
Impediments, right? There's
exactly
impediments, and there's regulation in place to try to level the playing field, but we are not done. I completely agree with you there.
Right.
And the other thing I think that's so important and powerful in that message, Karen, is that in the end, what we're really focusing on are two things. We're looking to be as safe and protective of client data as we can, right? Because we recognize the significance and the security around all of the information that we hold as stewards of this industry, and also trying to expand the reach of financing to borrowers across all spectrums and give them an experience that doesn't leave them feeling shell-shocked. Particularly for your point of folks with less exposure to the mortgage process, it can be very jarring, and it can leave you feeling very overwhelmed and confused by the number of requests that you've received. And yes, I think you're right. There's still plenty of wood to chop in that space, just in the, as they say in the industry, UX experience for the borrower. All right, Karen, I do not want to run out of time before we kind of talk through this last topic, which is, it is my experience and sort of my hypothesis that most of the women that I know that support mortgage technology came from a frontline or front of the house operations type role, and they've grown into their position throughout their career. So it got me thinking about lessons learned and considerations that you and I might share for those folks that are earlier in their career, where they're still acquiring experience and growing that domain knowledge. So Karen, what are some of, I don't know, like a couple, 2, 3 of your best tips as you reflect on your career, and not only what you've done, but kind of where you continue to want to go? What are some tips or suggestions you would make for the folks that are listening with us today?
Well, I think you hit on it really early on in our conversation, because when I said always learning, always asking, it's that be curious. Ask the questions. Try to figure out what's going on. And then what I always did was I would take that information back and I would play with it. I would play with the systems. I would play with the data. I would practice typing things so that I understood, so that I get faster. The faster I can get at doing something, that means that I spend less time on it and I can move on to something else. So practicing the information and utilizing the information and being curious as to what's next. What do I need to know next? Where can I go next? And actually asking those questions.
You guys, you heard it here from Karen Whitcomb. 2 gems. First, be curious. Stay in the hunt for information. Challenge ideas. And the other one I love and is often overlooked and very much parlays into kind of my piece, which is get in your reps. Practice. And if I may share one of my favorite yoga, so in addition to being a gardener, hello, Cultivating Conversations, I love to garden. I'm also a yogi, so I love to do yoga. And my favorite sort of theme or saying from my yoga practice is, the prize is the practice. The gifts are in the work. We think that we're going to feel much better when we've accomplished the thing. But in reality, the thing that gives us that great feeling is the work. It's knowing that we did it and it has paid off and we can see what we've built. So stay focused, stay curious, and stay busy. Karen said it several times throughout our conversation. She's always looking for something to do. And I have experienced it in my day-to-day practices where Karen pops in and says, I was working on something that somebody mentioned the other day, and I think I have found something. And we dig into it. Karen is one that practices a lot. Okay, here I'm going to share one of mine. So my best tip, not my best tip, just one of many, I've got many, is to take up space, be brave, don't be afraid to share your ideas. It can be really, really daunting, especially as a young professional, kind of growing your experience and coming up through the process, to never wanting to be wrong. I never wanted to be wrong, right? So I take lots of notes, I keep all of the details together. But there's tons of great research and TED Talks and papers and all sorts of things about the differences of how girls and boys are conditioned, and that girls are conditioned and raised to be perfect over being brave. So if anybody's interested in my favorite TED Talk, it's from Reshma Swarni, and it's called Teach Girls Bravery, Not Perfection. She's the girl that does I Teach Girls to Code. So if we are to give some, again, kind of crystallized advice and recommendations, it is stay curious, do your reps, practice, stay busy, and be brave. When you're working through your practices, practice being brave. Do not be afraid to be incorrect. Just be present, do your best, and it's going to work out great for all of us.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Karen, I happen to know you to be a very brave and strong professional individual, and it is not a skill that comes through by taking the easy path. So I think that's a good place for us to start to wrap up. I think that it was very brave of you to come today and share your experiences and your stories and just your dynamic energy with us. So on behalf of Mortgage Innovators and Indecomm, I want to thank you again, Karen, for sharing your time with us today. It has been such a pleasure.
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you so much for inviting me, Joy.
I can't wait to do it again. And I'd like to thank all of you guys for sharing your time with us as well. And from all of us here at Cultivating Conversations, we do wish you the very best on all of your adventures, and we'll see you again soon. Take good care, everyone.